Other media outlets finally wake up to CBC's predatory practices. I'm Brian Lilly with the Rebel.media. It was hard for me to believe my ears. Media executives from the private sector calling out CBC's expansionist, well beyond their mandate activities. But there it was last week before the House of Commons Heritage Committee. Not one, but two executives telling MPs CBC is competing too much with the private sector. One even using the term uberpredator. It all comes as CBC continues their hiring spree and expansion while other media outlets are shrinking. The latest example, CBC is launching an online-only opinion section. It's much like the opinion pages of the newspaper. They've hired Robin Urbach away from National Post to run the thing. This is something that goes well beyond their mandate. Like it or not, CBC is mandated by Parliament to run radio and television services across Canada. With the advent of the digital age, they've used the excuse they need to be online to promote their shows, showcase their content. But anyone paying attention knows that CBC's online offerings long ago stopped being about promoting radio or TV shows and became about being the biggest media empire in Canada, a digital powerhouse taking on all comers and using tax dollars to compete. That's why John Hondrich of the Toronto Star, the left-wing CBC-supporting Toronto Star, was complaining to the committee. Now, I think this is a very important point. This wasn't me, wasn't someone from the Sun tabloids or a conservative of any sort telling MPs CBC is unfairly competing. It's the head of Torstar. I mean, for a while, they ran a whole section on their website defending and celebrating CBC. But as Hondrich told the committee, they are now the biggest competitor for his newspaper, and he wants changes.
Who is our biggest newspaper competitor today? CBC.
Yeah.
CBC.ca. Spending incredibly on its website, unlimited resources, and able to take advertising. You want to deal with an issue, you can look at the BBC model, where in fact they have exactly the same situation, and they built up a huge digital presence, but on the BBC, they're not allowed to take advertising. There's an issue for you to discuss.
Imagine that, the Toronto Star calling for changes. It's interesting now that they're taking away his ad revenue, he has concerns about competition. And he should. Hondrich told the committee that he used to employ nearly 500 journalists. The evaporation of ad sales markets, that's forced a lot of cuts. Now less than 200 journalists at the Star. Shocking, isn't it? But over at CBC, they're still hiring. They're still expanding. The Robin Urbach hire to run what essentially amounts to a columnist website at CBC, well outside their mandate. That's why James Baxter, who started up a publication called iPolitics, told the committee that CBC is a predator.
While the CBC has done many wonderful things, it is important to know that from my vantage point, it is not some wonderful benevolent entity. It is an uber predator. Because of the nature of its web content, the CBC is not out there competing with Huffington Post and CNN. It is competing directly with the Globe and Mail, Postmedia, and yes, iPolitics.
Now, CBC supporters will claim the state broadcaster is filling a void, that they're doing what the private sector won't do, that they're serving underserved markets. That, of course, is poppycock. CBC's latest expansions, whether into a columnist and opinion section, into digital-only newsrooms in places like Hamilton, Kelowna, or London, they're nothing but the government-owned enterprise using their billion-dollar-plus-a-year subsidy to compete against the private sector. As Baxter told the committee, CBC's practices are having a chilling effect on entrepreneurs like him in scaring away investors.
Funding the CBC has a profoundly chilling effect on would-be entrepreneurs in this country, particularly when there are no undertakings on how and where that money is going to be spent. Investors are justifiably reticent to put their money into a market even when there is a clear void in that market because of the likelihood that once they prove the viability, the CBC will begin shifting funds there to compete against them. That is the biggest single obstacle to there being a vibrant and innovative marketplace of ideas in the media space.
CBC as uber predator, stealing talent, expanding into areas and killing off the competition, using money that comes from the taxes those very same competitors pay. It's a great system, isn't it? And don't think it's just on the news side that CBC is doing this. No, CBC's competing with the private sector and digital media on all fronts, from offering a music streaming service that plays Adele, Michael Bublé, and other artists that are hardly underserviced, to running a Netflix-type service aimed at francophones in Quebec for $6.99 a month. When did any of this become part of CBC's mandate? CBC, which takes $1.1 billion a year from taxpayers and just got an additional $150 million a year from Trudeau's Liberals, they like to claim they don't have enough money to broadcast properly to fulfill their mandate. But they're expanding into digital on all fronts, and this is on purpose. Their 2015 plan, called Everyone, Every Way, promises to see CBC expand into even more digital areas, including digital-only TV shows. This is an expansion that should be stopped because it's killing off local media across the country. Rogers announced fewer print copies of Chatelaine and Maclean's. They've announced layoffs. Every broadcaster in the country, except for CBC, has been going through round after round of layoffs. Same with newspapers across the country. Out at CBC, they're hiring, they're expanding, using taxpayer subsidy. I've been warning media executives for years that CBC was expanding well beyond their mandate and that they wanted to be king of all media, to replace the local newspaper, replace the local pop music station, to replace other outlets at once. Well, some media executives are finally waking up to this, and that's a good thing. But it will take politicians waking up for someone to actually do something to stop it. CBC needs to be reined in. I've long said that they should be sold off, but if we can't have that, can we at least ask that the government make them stick to their mandate? If you like what you just saw, stick around. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel, never miss another Rebel video again, or head on over to the rebel.media and become a member where you can access premium content.